Good morning. My name is Chris Bear, producer of Unstuck, an OCD Kids movie. This is Unstuck OCD Kids Speak Out. It's a good chance for kids with OCD to talk about their experiences, how therapy worked, how it affected their family, when it started. So, we found that when we filmed Unstuck a couple years ago, there were so many kids with stories to tell. We couldn't show them all. So this is one way to kind of talk to more kids, get their opinions, get you to ask questions of these kids, and kind of have an interactive dialogue. Sorry, I'm just playing with a function here on Facebook. So today my guest is going to be from England, our first guest from the UK. I'm kind of excited. It's going to be interesting, and we'll talk about OCD, how it affected her life, and all those things. And here is Izzy right now. We'll invite her on screen, and feel free to share this, like this, comment, please ask questions. I have tons of questions for her, but this works really well when we...
Hello.
Hey, how are you?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
Awesome. This is great. So welcome to Unstuck Kids Speak Out. I'm excited to talk to you today.
Thank you. Yeah.
So everybody, this is how it works. We're going to be talking, but you are more than welcome to ask questions and share. Izzy's got a lot of knowledge about OCD, and we definitely want to talk about the differences between the US and the UK. But first, I'd love you to kind of talk about when OCD first kind of came into your life, you first noticed it, first symptoms, those type of things.
Yeah. Firstly, if my connection gets bad, just say and I'll move because I live in the middle of nowhere, so the internet is awful. So yeah, basically, I think it all sort of started based on basically trauma. When I was about 6 or 7, I had a baby sister who died. Then about a year later, it's all right. Then about a year later, my mum had an epileptic fit. And then, so that was quite traumatic. And then a year later, I lost my mum to suicide. Oh. So it was a really sort of traumatic few years. And because I was that young, I really didn't understand a lot of it. So I think all the OCD sort of stemmed from that, really.
Were there specific fears you had based on that? Clearly, I'm going to assume harm coming to others. Therefore, you were trying to protect people.
Weirdly, that didn't come into it until a lot later. So it was probably about year 5. So I was about 8 or 9. My teacher, we were doing a religious studies lesson, and I remember my teacher saying, "Oh, so I'll pray. I'm not very religious, but I'll pray every night to keep my family safe." And from that day forward, every day, it's been my longest standing compulsion. I've prayed every single night, and it's gone from being a really simple thing to it's really complicated now. So it sort of all stemmed from that. And then when I was about 13, that's probably when it really turned into full-blown OCD of... I think the first big one was that if there were cracks in the ground or lines on the floor, I'd have to step over them with my left foot first.
Oh.
And that was the first sort of one that stuck. And I remember being in a PE lesson, we were doing the bleep test. I'm not sure if that's the thing you have in the US, but you basically run back and forth for ages. And there were loads of lines on the floor, so I couldn't do it. And I got more and more anxious, gave up, and went into the changing rooms. Oh.
I see you.
Yeah, okay. I can just hear a weird noise. And then one of my friends came into the changing rooms and said that one of my other friends had been sick. And obviously, OCD, You can see it. I automatically put it to what I'd done. And I think that from then on, it just got worse and worse. I started having contamination obsessions. That was the big one for a long time. When I started my A-levels, so when I started year 12, so I do French, biology and chemistry A-levels, because you sort of specialise a lot when you get to year 12 and year 13 in the UK. My French A-level was hell for the first 6 months because I was so obsessed with having everything looking perfect. Mm-hmm. That I just couldn't write anything in my lessons. So it was horrible. I used to cry every lesson, would hate going to the lessons. When it got to exam season, I just completely crumbled, basically, and it all sort of went from there.
So it was a lot of some contamination fears, scrupulosity, which is like, the religious obsessions, and then also
Yeah,
going into perfectionism in school. It kind of all just steamrolled. Um,
yeah.
was your family aware of what you were going through? Did people try to get you help, even if it wasn't the right help? I mean, how was that how did it affect life? You were just talking about school. How about home?
So a lot of my OCD really revolved around being at school. School was where all my triggers were. I could sort of cope at home. And I was listening to your talk with Sammy last week, and she said that her OCD revolved around she had to tell people. I'm the complete opposite. I I don't tell anyone. I have only just worked up to telling my therapist what my actual intrusive thoughts are,
Oh.
because I can't talk about it. So I hid it for a long, long time. Um, and then when it eventually all came out, that was when I sort of went through the whole therapy system. But that's taken a long time because of how it works in the UK. Yeah.
And folks, that's interesting that she brings that up, because a lot of people, you make stereotypes, you make assumptions about an issue, and you think, oh, everybody handles it one way, and depending on the person, it's completely opposite. Sammy talked about
Yeah.
it, was all about reassurance for a lot of her, so she needed to talk to people about it and also talk about her feelings. You did the opposite. You didn't want anybody to know. Was there fear
Yeah.
involved? You thought, oh my God, people are going to think I'm weird or crazy or something like that? Or you just
Um,
didn't know?
I can't. I don't really know. I think I was just so. Obviously, I've done a lot of work in therapy about the cycle of OCD and how everybody gets intrusive thoughts, but the difference in OCD is how you interpret them. And I've realised a lot of what I feel is a responsibility, that I am responsible for keeping other people safe. And I think I really felt like it was my responsibility. I just had to cope with all this because obviously my family went through this huge trauma, and I didn't want to put any more worry on them.
Mm.
I didn't want to make up a fuss, or the whole thing is I don't like people worrying about me. That's why I still struggle to be open with my family, because I don't want them to worry about me.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's so many different issues. So, you talked about how kind of OCD has changed in your life, how it's more. Folks, if you want to ask questions, feel free. This is Unstuck Kids Speak Out, so this is definitely a conversation to talk about obsessive compulsive disorder issues you might be having. Izzy's over in the UK, so if there's folks over there, we're happy to talk about how the differences between the US, the UK, how you were able to find help, and that's kind of what I want to talk about shortly. Is there's a national health system there, so you finally go, okay, I
Yeah.
need some help. Is it just a regular doctor, or how did you find an OCD doctor? How did that all work?
So so in the UK we have the National Health Service. I rate it highly. It's incredible. We are so lucky to have it. So I eventually went to the doctor. It's just a general doctor, and they refer you to CHAMHS, which is the Children and Adolescent Mental Health Services. The problem with the NHS is it's extremely underfunded. For the amount of people that use it, it doesn't get enough funding, which is tricky, especially when you get to finding mental health support.
Yeah.
I think CAMS gets something like 0.8% of the budget. It doesn't get a lot of funding. So the one thing, it's great because you get free therapy, but you have to wait. You do have to wait. There is a waiting list. I think I waited 3 months, probably the first time. And the other thing with CAMS is it's a massive lottery. You just get lucky based on who you get.
Oh, so you can't say I need to find an anxiety specialist or bipolar or OCD. You just get who
Not
you get.
really, no. So you just get whoever you're given. And unfortunately, I did not click with the first person I got put with. It just didn't work out for me. We just didn't get on. Eventually, she referred me to a psychiatrist who diagnosed me, and I was going to start medication. I'm sure I can talk about that a bit later, but there were different reasons why I didn't start it straight away. But then I decided I didn't want to go back and see that therapist because it wasn't working for me. But because you have to go back to the bottom of the waiting list and wait for another therapist. So that was another, I think, 6 months that I was waiting to see another therapist. And it's the kind of thing where when you finally reach out and get help, that's when you need the help the most, but you still have to wait another few months to actually get it. which is really frustrating, but it's just how it works. You can't really do a lot about it.
So it's like you take the step to go, okay, I need help. I realize I do. I'm going to reach out for help. Then somebody says, yes, we're going to help you in 3 to 6 months. Did you just try to sustain yourself? Did it get worse? Did you try to find other ways to get help?
Yeah, so when I first got into therapy, it was very irregular. It would be once every 2 weeks, and then I wouldn't see her for 2 months, and it was very regular, so it didn't really help me anyway while I was doing it. And then I think when I stopped seeing her, it was just before my exams, my GCSEs. So they're the big exams that everybody in the UK does when you're 16. That's why I didn't start medication straight away, because it was just before exam season, and I didn't want to have to cope with any side effects that could be detrimental to my grades. I did quite well at my GCSEs. I was really proud of myself, especially considering I was really actually struggling quite a lot at that time.
Well, having perfectionism and then taking a test that's timed, I'm sure, and it's a lot of pressure on it. That's even,
exactly.
Congrats to getting through it.
Yeah. Thanks. I mean, I was quite lucky when I got into year 12 and I got into sixth form, because after I did my mocks that were absolutely awful, my teacher said, maybe you need some extra time. So now I get extra time on my exams, which is really useful. But then, I waited until so I stopped seeing the therapist and went back to the bottom of the waiting list in probably just before May. And then I think I saw my next therapist in December. So it was a wait.
Yeah.
It was definitely a wait.
And were you aware?
Then when I actually...
I was going to say, were you aware of, had any of the therapists or anybody said, hey, this is OCD, you should look into it, learn about it?
I knew. Before they told me, I knew what it was. I'd sort of seen things before, and when it turned contamination-wise, because I wasn't really sure what the intrusive thoughts were, in all honesty. I'd never seen anything like it. And then there's a show in the UK called Obsessive Compulsive Cleaners. I'm sure you've heard of it. It's awful. I didn't think it was awful because I didn't really know what OCD was. Now I know what it is. It's the most awful thing in the world, and I cannot believe that's even allowed to be the title of a TV show. But I saw that and thought, that's what it is. So I did some research, and then it all made sense. So then when I went to see the psychiatrist, I actually asked her, I was like, do you think this is OCD? And she said, yeah. So I was given some websites to look at, but they were all just information, didn't really have any help on it. So it really was just waiting until I could get into therapy.
Wow, that's really, it's interesting how a show that completely uses OCD in the wrong way helped lead you down the path. My daughter is not a similar situation, but she was watching a kids TV show, and the dad was a psychiatrist, and she happened to look at the TV and say I need to see somebody like this. So it's funny how you have roundabout ways to start getting therapy. Guys, this is OCD Kids Speak Out. I'm talking with Izzy. She's over in the UK, so feel free to use that comment button. Ask questions about OCD, how she deals with it. There's a lot of differences between the US and the UK. And, I'm just going to keep talking, but feel free to, share this out or, ask questions, tag people you think should see this. This will be up on our page for a long time. So I want to talk, you've talked about school. How did you were trying to hide OCD. I assume that meant from your friends as well. Did that affect your relationships? Did it affect teachers and schooling? How did the OCD, deal with school?
Yeah, so as I said, school was where all my triggers were, so it was really difficult, especially when I couldn't put a name to it. So it's a lot easier when you could go in and say, I have OCD, could you help me? Whereas if it's a lot harder if you go, I have all these things that I have to do, it's a lot more difficult to portray what it is. And I think I find it easier to be open with my friends than my family because I don't really know why, I just do. So I had a couple of my best friends at the time who helped me a lot. But still they didn't really understand it. So it was sort of they were quite good at not pointing things out. So if I was tapping a sign or walking in a slightly weird way, they wouldn't go, oh, why are you doing that? They just sort of accept it. Which I was really lucky with. My friends are absolutely brilliant. I can't fault them in any way. They're amazing. And I think when things got worse, so I had a lot of number of sessions, and it was 3 because I was convinced that awful things would happen if I did. Obviously, doing maths is not very easy when you can't write number 3. So I did end up, my friends forced me to go and see my maths teacher and tell him. He was lovely, he's absolutely amazing. And he was like, okay, it's fine, you can like replace it with a letter until you are better. So that's what I did. So I was quite lucky.
Could you like write like an E instead, so it's the other way, but it kind of is a 3? Hey, Stacy. Hey, Sally. Because I think about that with numbers and counting, and clearly that's hard if you can't write a specific number. That's going to come up.
Yeah.
But that's cool that, and your teacher kind of understood. Okay, this is your thing, and we'll have our own little code, and that'll be, I know you're writing a 3 because you can't.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think at that point I was also wearing gloves, so I think because of contamination stuff. So I think a few of my teachers might have put 2 and 2 together and just sort of let me get on with it. I did have one teacher, actually, my French teacher, who she sticks to the rules. So when I would walk in wearing gloves, she'd tell me to take them off because it's not part of the school uniform. And I would really struggle with that because obviously everything in my head was, everything's disgusting, everything's dirty, don't touch anything. So I really did struggle when she told me that I wasn't allowed to wear them. So I didn't like her for a while.
I'm trying to figure out, because sometimes OCD picks and chooses, so you just mentioned gloves. Did you always feel like you had to wear long sleeve shirts and pants and like cover every piece of your skin, or was it just here?
The weird thing is, it is about my hands. My contamination OCD, a lot of people are like, will think like, I don't really worry about like showering and stuff, but my hands are the part of my body that has to be clean. My hands and my arms, really. So it would be, yeah, exactly as you say, I would have to wear long sleeves, which was a bit of a struggle. Actually, this last summer, we had a heat wave in the UK, so it was absolutely boiling. I was on my biology field trip, so we were outside all day in like doing experiments with bugs and stuff. I don't really know. And I wore a hoodie and jeans the whole time. And I am still shocked that I didn't pass out because I was just really hot the whole time. My teachers were going, Izzy, just take off your hoodie. I think at one point I was wearing pajamas that had short sleeves, and my teacher walked in and went, you have arms. And I was like, yep. I think I did actually manage in the end to take my hoodie off, but it was quite tricky.
I just
want to take a second. It's hard.
Yeah, I mean, because you have to not just think about, what you're going to be doing every day and what the assignments are, but then there's the extra stress and mental, capacity that you need to really focus on hands. What am I touching? What did I touch? Did I touch it? All the questions that are involved in that.
Yeah.
And I quickly spiral.
Yeah.
Sally,
and one of the hard things about that field trip.
Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, yeah. One of the things about the field trip was we would be outside all day and I'd have no opportunity to wash my hands. So I'd have to eat I could only use hand sanitizer, which was tough because at that point, that was when it was getting better. It was definitely, I was on the road to recovery at that point, but I was still really struggling. So it was a good, inescapable exposure, I guess you could say.
Right. That really forced you to, probably a high anxiety, like a 10 on the hierarchy scale of exposures.
Yeah.
I just want to take a second and answer Sally's question, which is a difference between supportive and reassuring. From my point of view as a parent, there is a limit to how much you can reassure, and it can take over time. So there are, questions that come up. This is expired. Is it still good? Will this thing hurt me? And it takes time to kind of know and understand why that might be asked and how many times it's asked. And so I think it's a relationship you get to, with your loved ones or your family, or if it's yourself with OCD, when, like who's asking the question, as a lot of times that we say. And supportive is, I would say,
Yeah.
doing things not necessarily to not trigger OCD, but making sure when the person has an issue or has anxiety or their anxiety is stress, you're doing things to kind of try not to aggravate them as much. So you're working with them as opposed to, forcing as much. Izzy, what's your point of view on being supportive versus being reassuring?
Yeah, so my stepmom's actually pretty good. One of my things used to be I'd have to know what was going to happen in the day, especially if we were leaving the house. I'd say, well, what time are we leaving? What time are we coming back? And I think she told my therapist once, she was like, I'll say it once. She was like, I'll say it once, and if you've heard me, that's enough, because she was like, we're not leading into a whole reassurance seeking cycle. But I do understand from the point of view of not wanting to reassure too much, but also not wanting to leave somebody in a complete anxiety spiral. But I think, yeah, talking about the difference between who's asking, if it's the OCD asking or if it's the person asking, I think that's a really good way of putting it.
A lot of times, Sally, with what we try to do, it doesn't always work. What we try to do is kind of like the first question is answered, and then after that, and sometimes the same question could be asked in a different way. It's just like, to what Izzy said, we know you heard me, therefore I'm not going to repeat it, or remember what I said, and therefore it's on the person that asked the question to think about it. So, you were talking about, getting forced to do exposures. When you saw the therapist, what did you work on? How did you learn about exposures, and how did you kind of learn about how OCD is treated?
See, I actually knew what I needed before I got into therapy. I knew I needed to do ERP because I'd watched, I'm not sure if you've seen it, it's the Extreme OCD camp.
Yep.
So I'd seen that and I was like, this is what I need to do. When I eventually got in with a good therapist, unfortunately, I had 2 trainees back to back, and they were absolutely brilliant, but because they were training, they weren't there long term.
Oh.
So the first therapist I had for 3 months, I think, she was brilliant. She worked a lot on the CBT and like anxiety side of it. And then my second therapist, she worked a lot on the ERP. So we did hierarchies. It was the contamination stuff that was really ruling my life at that time. So that's what we did. We'd do a hierarchy of, I think it would be like touching a table, touching a door handle, stuff like that. One of my other long-standing obsessions has been with cyanide poisoning. So I convinced myself that I'd get cyanide poisoning. There were certain things. So couldn't eat cherries, couldn't drink tap water because I thought it would kill me.
Tap water, interesting.
So it was those things. So yeah, so we have a water filter jug at home. I would only drink from that, which, again, going back to like forced exposure, I would find ways out of doing everything. So on that field trip that we went on, I had 2 big bottles of safe water in my suitcase, and I just rationed that for 3 days. So that was like probably the furthest I've gone for my OCD. And thinking back, I just still can't believe that I did it, but it was the only solution in my head. So yeah, we do like hierarchies of that, and then do the exposures. But I was actually really motivated to do them because at that point I really was sick of it. I just was done with it. I wanted it out of my life. So I think the thing with it was I find anticipation harder than the anxiety of doing it. So I would be really, I think the first one we did was touching the table in my therapy room. My therapist did it. She'd do all my exposures with me. The first one she did was she rubbed her hands all over the table, then licked her hands. I couldn't even watch her do it because it made me want to cry. But I think I stood next to that table for about 10 minutes because I just couldn't, like, the thought of actually putting my hands on it was really scary. And then I did do it, and then I think I was all right. I genuinely am a lot better after the exposure's been done, weirdly. So the tap water one was definitely the hardest. I was sat with a glass of water, literally crying because it had come from the tap and not from what I deemed as safe. And I kept thinking, this is so stupid, because it's the thing with OCDs, I know it's illogical, I know it doesn't make sense, but that doesn't make it any easier.
I mean, you're talking about
So,
the
yeah.
anticipation of doing the thing you fear is harder than almost when you finally do it and get it done with. And I can relate
Yeah,
to that, even not having OCD. Sometimes you just have something that you don't want to do, you've been putting off, and if it's something that you know is going to cause anxiety, of
yeah,
course, it's, you know, it's like you're getting anxiety from the anxiety of doing something. So you have to force yourself to do that.
exactly.
I'm curious about the tap water. When did you, I mean, did you literally first start with like, hey, you have to drink a glass of water, or did you build up to like something smaller, like
Um,
you know, touch it with your hands or put it in your on your head or shower with it or something like that?
um, the weird thing was I could do all of that. I could shower, I could wash my hands with it. It was purely drinking it. So, which is frustrating, because it means the only thing that you can do to beat it is just bite the bullet and do it. So the first thing was just have to take a sip. And I found it really horrendous. It was probably the worst one I've done, contamination wise. I just sat with it in my hands for ages, just crying over tap water, and I felt really stupid. But then my therapist kept going. I kept saying, it's just tap water, I don't understand why it's so hard. And she was saying, but it's not just tap water, because of all the things that you attach to the tap water. If it's just tap water to everyone else, but to you, the tap water equals death. And those were the things that were really stuck with me. So I get really frustrated at myself when I can't do things that other people do so easily. And I think the thing that she was really good at drumming into me was, it's not just tap water, it's not just an apple, it's not just a table, because to you, the table is illness and sickness and death, or the water means poisoning and death. And I think that was really an important thing to be to have as an understanding.
Right. And, you know, did that make you feel like, wow, she kind of understands me, therefore you had a little more courage to do it? You understood that she
Yeah,
wasn't just pushing you to say, come on, stupid, this is just water. It was about, hey, you've attached all these other things to it. Of course it's going to be hard. That's why it's an exposure. That's why you know, it takes you 10 minutes to
yeah,
do it.
mm.
That's amazing.
Yeah. She was brilliant.
And these are some of the things. This is one of the reasons I love doing this, because I get to kind of hear these personal stories, and what you just talked about there is going to help me in how we approach my life in our family. So I really appreciate that. That was super helpful for me. That's why I was talking
Thank
about
you.
it. So I know we kind of talked a little on, folks. This is Unstuck OCD Kids Speak Out. So feel free to ask questions. Hey, Stacy, Sally, thanks for. I'm glad that was a helpful response. You know, feel free. Izzy's over in the UK, so we have kind of a two-world thing going on here. It's a little bit of different system. There's you know, a free healthcare system, but you got to wait a little while. So you mentioned to me a little earlier about the kind of intrusive thoughts system, and I was curious about what that was. Was that part of like some compulsions, or, you know, was it like a thing you had to do? You talked about washing your hands, you know, rituals that you had to do, or something that was here.
Um, so, like, what my intrusive thoughts meant for me.
Yeah, or like, you know, um, maybe just talk about some of the things that, you know, let's say you did accidentally touch something, you know, were there rituals that you had to do to kind of get through things? So you talked about washing your hands. Were there other things that had to do that, and, you know, involved in that?
Yeah, so I would, if I accidentally did something that I didn't want to do, it would obviously cause a lot of anxiety. I think the one thing that springs to mind is a time that I went through a phase where I couldn't click a pen. So, you know, like, have I got a pen here that clicks? Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
like this. So I couldn't do that. I can now, because to me, if I did that, I would stab someone with it. And obviously that's a really horrific thought to have. And I think the one time I did it was really when it all spiraled out of control, because I put the pen down. I think I might have thrown it in the bin. I just couldn't cope with it. I stopped writing. It was in a lesson. I stopped writing. It was awful. So every time I did something that the OCD didn't want me to do, it would really re-solidify things, because I'd just be hyper aware the whole time that I was almost looking for something bad to have happened so that I could blame it on myself, which was really tricky. And I think I've done that a lot. Especially back to what I was saying about that PE lesson when one of my friends was sick, I have always put that to myself, even though I remember her saying that she hadn't had breakfast that morning or something like that. It wasn't my fault, and I know it wasn't my fault, but it's the OCD thought of maybe it was. And I think I'm always looking for evidence against conventional logic that supports my OCD logic.
And that's, you're kind of really bringing to light the big issue with OCD is that, one, you're catastrophizing everything. Like, if I do this, click a pen, I'm going to automatically do something terrible with it. And then the idea that you are fighting and spending so much mental energy fighting with you and compartmentalizing and thinking about and focusing on what's going on up here, which is exhausting.
Yeah. I am always exhausted, and I get really frustrated, and I'm always asking people how they're not as tired as I am. But then when I think about it, it's because my brain doesn't stop. I might sleep 10 hours a day, but for the 14 that I'm awake, my brain doesn't stop worrying. So, and that is completely exhausting. I had a psychiatrist actually this week tell me that if you run a marathon, half an hour's rest and you're okay. A couple of days later, you're back to normal. If you are mentally exhausted, it just wipes out your whole body. He was saying that when he was studying for his medicine finals, he slept 16 hours a day and worked for 6, because it's just exhausting when your brain is going all the time.
That's really interesting, because conventional wisdom is, I'm running a marathon, I'm sweating, I'm expending energy, and therefore I should be tired. Whereas sitting at a desk all day and, let's say, studying is all here. You didn't physically be active, but you're tiring your body in different ways. Anna, I totally agree. That's a fantastic explanation. Not only of just, OCD and that mental illness, but also just dealing with school and stress and work in general. So we don't have to talk about this if you don't want to, but you mentioned medicine earlier, and I was just, I wanted to touch on that. And, it took you a little while to start to get to it. And then how has it helped with therapy?
So the first medication I was on, I had really awful side effects too. It made me really, really depressed. So it really helped with my anxiety, but on the flip side, I just pretty much gave up on life. I didn't want to do anything, just wanted to lie in bed, didn't want to talk to anyone. So we came off that, started a new one, and I've sort of slowly been going up the doses to sort of find the one that works for me, because it sort of it's had a weird effect on me in that it'll work for a few months and I'll feel brilliant, and then it will go back to, I'll feel better than I am when I'm off it, but it still feels like I could be better. I have a really funny relationship with my medication. I had a couple of weeks, maybe 2 months ago, where I stopped taking it. I stopped taking it because I ran out. My prescription ran out. And because when you're in CHAMHS, every prescription that you have has to go through CHAMHS. So it takes a week rather than 3 days to get the prescription, which is really frustrating because it means that it's a lot more likely that you run out.
Right, you're almost like
So
you have to almost like count down and hope, God, if I have seven pills left, they better, I better call now and hope it's ready.
Exactly. So I came off them, felt brilliant for a couple of days, and then completely crashed. Felt awful. My OCD got awful again. I had a teacher who said, "You are a different person to how you were 2 weeks ago." And so then that was when I really realised maybe I've got to go back up again. Then I did the really stupid thing of going from nothing up to my quite high dose that I was on, which was stupid because my body reacted to it and I was not very well. to say the least. But now I'm back up to it. I'm sort of getting there with it. It has taken some time to sort of balance it out. I think I'm going up a dose again soon. But the thing with it is it works so differently for different people. So I have people ask me, oh, what do you think about this medication? Or what do you think about this one? Have you been on this? And it's like, well, actually, I know somebody who's had the exact opposite effect. We've been on the same two medications, but she really reacted to the one that I had worked really well on, and I had a really bad reaction to the one that works well for her. And it's so individual that it's really hard to give people advice on, because at the end of the day, it's not the same as an antibiotic. It targets a different thing. So you can't just, there's no one size fits all medication. And I think it's really important to say that.
No, absolutely. And, you know, when we, whenever medication comes up in a lot of the parent forums, it's always, you know, I try to, as well as I like people who do this, to say, like, talk to your psychiatrist, talk to your doctor about it. It's huge, because for exactly that reason, what works for me may not work for you. You have to cycle up and cycle off. It's not just like I go from 0 to my full dosage. And you have you have to be patient and understand that it might take, you know, I remember our therapist saying, our psychiatrist saying, that it might take 6 to 8 weeks from full dosage. So we started in 1 month. It was not really till 4 or 5 months later that we could say, okay, it should be working now. And then when it was time to go off, it was like, okay, it took another 2 or 3 months to get off of it. So you kind of have to go up and down. But how has it helped you in doing exposures? Have you noticed that things are a little easier to fight or focus on? Like, how has medicine helped in what you're doing?
Yeah, my anxiety is definitely a lot better. Really, my sort of struggle with mental health started as social anxiety. I would wake up in the morning feeling like I was about to be sick because I was that anxious. So when it got to a point where I was on the medication, I really felt my anxiety start to go down, and that was brilliant, because it did mean that I could start trying to challenge things small. Like, when I was still waiting for therapy, I could still start to challenge small things where I could. And then when I was in therapy, obviously I never did any exposures off the medicine, so I can't really give a comparison, but I think it would have been a lot harder if I hadn't had that aid of medication.
And so can you talk a little bit about, you know, victories that you had? The first time you realized you could do something that was a problem before, you know, do you remember, you know, a small, big, that first little, or even a big victory that you had against a fear?
Yeah, so I think the big one that really does come to mind is I, connecting to my cyanide poisoning fear, I didn't eat an apple for 2 years. Got into therapy. I'd sort of been working up to it. It was at the top of my hierarchy, and my therapist came in. She had a bag, and I knew there was an apple in there. So the actual exposure for the plan had just been to cut it up, because I still wasn't solid on, like, touching an apple. She's like, you just have to cut it up. You don't have to eat it or anything.
It's almost like be in the room with the apple and have it cut and just look at the apple.
Yeah. And I was doing it, and it felt fine. And I was going, this is actually not too bad. And I was like, can I eat it? And she was like, it's up to you. I'm not going to make you. You can do what you want. I have a very funny relationship with people telling me that I don't have to do it. I'd rather you just go, yes, you have to. Because if you say I don't have to do it, I won't do it. But if I have a therapist literally going, yeah, right now you have got to do this, I'll do it. So I actually did eat it, and I just remember it was scary. It was absolutely terrifying. But once I'd done it, I really felt a lot better. And it was the kind of thing of, oh, if I can do this once, I can do it 100 times, and I'll be fine. And that was really, I think that really kick-started that recovery from that side of things, because from then on, I've now been trying to have an apple in my lunchbox every single day, because I know as soon as I stop doing it, that's when the obsession is going to start creeping in again. So I'm really trying to keep going with it and keep the cycle going.
Yeah, and you're showing your mind, you're showing OCD that, you know, you can overcome it. You don't have power over me. You know, you demonstrated a big fear before by clicking the pen, and that was, you know, something you couldn't do before. So it's great that these little victories and big victories, you know, I think anybody in life, you have to remember there are highs and lows. So when you have those highs,
Yeah,
remember what they are, because when you're low, they will hopefully help you get back there or understand, yeah, there are things that suck and there are things
absolutely.
that are great. And, I have to remember both so that when I'm high, I know that it can go bad. And it always helps, something that helps regulate me just in everyday life.
Yeah,
But I imagine with therapy, you're trying to do it can help you push to whatever you're worried on next.
yeah. And I think what helps me a lot is thinking where I was this time last year. So we just did the so the year 12, so the year below me, have just done their mocks, and I was just sat thinking, this time last year I was in bits. I was completely breaking over the thought of doing these exams. I was barely functioning. I was wearing gloves. I wasn't writing in my French lessons because I was so terrified. And then thinking to now, in that I actually put gloves on the other day and thought, how did I ever do anything wearing these? Because it's really difficult. But back then, it was the only option I saw. So my thing is thinking, well, this time last year, I would never have done this. This time a month ago, I would never have done this. And that really helps me, is sort of, you don't realise how far you've come until you look to where you started.
Your motivation. So I don't want to keep you too much
Yeah.
longer, but I do have a couple questions. Stacy, thank you so much.
Okay.
She's like, yes, it is scary, but it does, anxiety, does kind of get better over time. And yeah, Stacy, I really appreciate it. She's a huge advocate behind the scenes for a lot of things that we do, also in OCD in general. So I appreciate you tuning in. Folks, if you got a couple questions for Izzy, I can shut up and feel free to ask your questions. What I did want to talk about very quickly was, have you seen Pure? And folks in the U.S., Pure is a new kind of mini series about kind of a comedic, serious show in the UK about a girl with pure OCD, intrusive thoughts. Have you seen it yet?
No, I haven't. It's on my list of things to watch
I think
when I get time.
it just kind of started. And you also started to get involved a little with OCD UK. Is that right?
Yeah. I don't really have a lot to say on it because it hasn't really kick-started yet. It's all just being sorted. But with that, I've managed to sort of get more involved in what we're doing at schools. So in a couple of weeks is Time to Talk Day. I'm not sure if you've heard of it. I'm not sure if it's just a UK thing. But there's a charity called Time to Change. It's about mental health. And on the 7th of February, they have Time to Talk Day. And we've been doing, me and a friend have been sort of building up to do things in school. Next week I'm doing an assembly, and thinking about that is crazy to me because 2 years ago I cried and refused to do my speaking assessment in English.
So you're going to
and
talk
now
to
I'm
your
about
entire
to stand.
school? Fantastic.
Just my year group.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah. So I've got to do that twice, so that should be good. But we've managed to do a lot of campaigning about mental health, and one of the great things we've got to do is, you might have heard of the campaign hashtag I Cry Because, and they did it a lot with men to break down the stigma around mental health, and we thought it'd be a good idea to do that with teachers. And it was crazy. We didn't think we'd get as many responses as we did, but within the first day we had, I think, 10 people respond and say, this sounds amazing, we'd love to get involved. So we've been going around the school for the last couple of days, and it's really inspiring actually to hear these teachers who are essentially role models, and you see as adults describe things that really upset them and make them cry, and it's been really eye-opening to hear.
Well, I love one of the things I like hearing is, and Sammy talked about it last week, is you're in a place where you're scared. We talked about it in the beginning, how you didn't want to talk about it. That was a big fear of yours, telling everybody you had OCD, and now you have come to your own part of therapy and recovery, in the sense that you are now providing that help and the outlet to other people. So that's fantastic, and I hope that also makes you feel great.
Yeah, I think I have been incredibly lucky with my friends. I know a couple of them are watching, so Alice is there. She's one of my best friends. They are incredible. So I've got a friend who's in all my lessons with me. She is probably the most chill person you'll ever meet, but that's great because it means that when I'm anxious and flapping about because I'm what's the word, catastrophizing about something, she's just like, whoa, let's chill. I am just super lucky about how incredible my friends are. I've got one of my best friends has emetophobia, so she really understands the illogical side of it,
Mm-hmm.
which has been really good because it's something that we both can understand and help each other with. But it's also really good, I found, to have friends who don't understand on a personal level, because it means they can be really objective with it and just say, no, that's not going to happen. And just, while they can say, I can see why you feel like that, but actually they can just throw logic at me and say, that doesn't make any sense. That's OCD. Okay, stop. So I think I'm extremely lucky with them.
Well, that I wasn't going to talk about this, but this really brings it up a point. So you meet somebody or, friends who don't understand OCD. How do you explain it to them? How do you explain, so they can understand, to your point, oh, that's OCD. That's, let's have a logical explanation. What do you say to somebody that you're kind of just meet or, is interested about or doesn't know?
Yeah. So my general way of doing it is, I know it's the cliche, but it's so much easier to explain contamination because you can say, I'm afraid of germs, so I wash my hands. It makes sense. So that's a really good place to start, because when you say, I think something's bad going to happen, so I tap this, people struggle more to find the connection. So I think I find it helps to sort of do the ones that make sense first. Whereas I've had a lot of friends who've really watched me go through it, so they can go, okay, she's done this every day for the last month, so this is probably an OCD thing. And I don't think I ever came out to many of my friends and said, I have OCD. I think they sort of, it never felt like a big thing of going, sitting people down and going, okay, so I've got this. I think I did tell a few of my friends, but I think I don't really know how I explain it to them. They're quite good at picking things up. I think I'm quite lucky in that they're all quite well educated, but they're all actually happy to ask questions. I've got friends that will just say, oh, but could you do this? So really like challenging the logic of it and saying, so you can't do this, but could you do this? And I'll say, yeah, maybe.
Did they try to do it with you? Did somebody say, I'll eat an apple with you? Or, I'm going to go lick a table with you?
Not as much that they'll like do it with me, but if I say, I'm going to try and do this, can you like come with me? They'll be like, yeah, definitely. They're good at saying, really trying to say the right thing. And I think it is hard when you don't understand it to know what to say. But I think I've got friends. I've said it 100 times, but I'm really lucky with how incredible they are, and saying what I need to hear, even if it's the harsh truth of, actually, that's neat enough, you need to hand that in now.
That's great. Yeah, sometimes good is good enough. And there's a separate, I think in all everyday life, you kind of understand when you have an assignment, what you need to do, and what you really want to focus on. Sometimes I work in a creative field, and a lot of times we will have 3 or 4 assignments, and sometimes you say, okay, I'm gonna do the thing that has to be done first, that I don't really care as much about because it's got to be done, and then I'm going to leave more time to focus on the things that I like or that I find passionate, and sometimes that can help regulate how you get things done and how quickly you do it and how much time and effort you do it. I want to talk a little bit about when you were going through OCD, while you were waiting for the NHS and your CHAMHS meeting, you talked about doing research. Were there any specific sites like intrusivethoughts.org or things that you found that were helpful to push you in the right direction that you could recommend to other people?
So I watched a lot of documentaries. In all honesty, I find it a lot easier to watch things rather than to read big chunks of text. So Extreme OCD Camp is a good one. There's one called, I think it's called Bedlam, but the first episode of that focuses around OCD, and it's also some really niche areas of OCD, ones that not a lot of people would talk about. So that's a good one. I think it's called Bedlam. I will double check. But websites, yeah. Young Minds is a good UK website. It's brilliant, as well as Mind, which is the
Right.
bigger organisation. Yeah. OCD UK, OCD Youth. We've got Childline in the UK, which can be quite good, especially if you're struggling in the moment and just want someone to rant. There's also something called Kooth, which is an online counselling thing that's in the UK that you can either chat online through messenger to a counsellor, or you can just write out everything in an email and they'll get back to you, and that's really good because and you can do that completely anonymously as well. That's a good one.
I'm always impressed. And when we even started to work on the film and OCD, even well before that, OCD came into our lives. I think I connected with a lot of people in the UK before even in the US, and I think they're, from my point of view, it's more out and open to talk about mental health in the UK. Maybe it's because
we're getting there.
Yeah, it's a smaller population as well. I mean, friends over there remind me that the population of England, when I'm saying England and Scotland, is like the same as New York City. There's 19 million people here, so
there's a lot less people. Yeah,
perspective. But reading articles in the Guardian, I know that show. Isn't there another show? I want to say it's called Outlandish or something, or Outlanders, where there's one character with OCD. There's the extreme OCD camp. So and folks in the U.S., a lot of these things are on YouTube, and you can Google and find them.
Yeah.
And see either repeats or I know Pure, which we talked about earlier, has not come to the U.S. yet. But there are a lot of great resources, Mind.org, OCD Action, OCD UK, OCD Youth, which I believe right now is actually having a support group somewhere in the UK. I've been in touch with them, so they were like, we're going to watch it on replay. Yes, and Stacy, a lot of these things are on the Unstuck, on our OCD resources page, but we can certainly, we'll fill it up later. And last thing I was going to say, I always ask people, any words of wisdom to anybody watching this and repeat that you would want to tell people about OCD or your struggle or anything like that?
I think always remembering that you're stronger than it, and that it's your brain at the end of the day, and sometimes you do just have to bite the bullet, and it's absolutely horrible. Nobody going through ERP will ever tell you that it's fun, because it's not fun. And you just have to accept that it might be really horrible for a few months, but then the few horrible moments of really awful ERP lead to a life where you don't have to worry about OCD. And that is my main motivation of doing the really horrible exposures, is that sometime soon I won't even have to worry about this. And I think that's good. And also finding things that you love that aren't OCD. I'm a huge musical theatre fan. I am constantly finding new musicals and singing at the top of my lungs. It drives my family insane, but it makes me feel better. And I think just find something that can help you to escape from constantly worrying about things, because that is where you'll really find your peace.
That's fantastic advice, even in general, making sure that you have something to focus on. Hi, Becky. I will see you in May, hopefully. But Becky, you should connect with Izzy, because, she's involved with OCD Youth and definitely can add a lot of insight to, the OCD community there in the UK as well as in the US. Thank you very much for your help. Thank you so much for, talking with me today. It's been awesome to see your story. And now a lot of the things that I've seen you post online connect for me. So it's fantastic to see, and actually that brings up one last question, which is, how have you found social media and, with dealing with OCD? Has it helped you? Has it hurt? How has that been involved?
Yes, so I think I have a very healthy relationship with social media. I'm quite good at going, that's real, that's fake. So that's quite good for me to have that level head and know when I need to take a step back and say, actually, I'm going to log out for a bit. But I really enjoy reading other people's stories and feeling pride for people that I've never even met. And knowing that other people have been through the same thing has really, really helped me. And to listen to other people who have struggled with things and can give me words of wisdom, and then I can give them advice back, and that has really helped me. I think helping other people really does put it all into perspective and say, actually, I might be going through a really rubbish time at the moment, but it will give me some great life experience that I can use later in life to help other people. So I really enjoy sharing my story and helping other people.
I think you definitely are, and today I think you did as well. The last thing I'm going to say is there's a comment here from a site called A Penny for Your Intrusive Thoughts. I think you should check that out because it's an anonymous way to...
It's brilliant. Yeah, I've seen it.
Fantastic. And those are the ways that we can connect people in different parts of the world. So thank you so much for coming on by. I really appreciate it. Have a great day.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, and I hope to talk to you soon.
Yeah.
So that was Izzy. Feel free, if you're watching the replay, to ask questions. We will definitely respond. Thank you for everybody in the U.S. and the U.K. That was awesome to have a kind of international audience. I hopefully will be at the OCD Action Conference in May. If you are watching this in the UK, there are two great organizations that I know of, OCD UK and OCD Action. Fantastic. Check out their their conferences. They have great information on their website. And we will see you next month with another guest on Unstuck OCD Kids Speak Out. Talk to you soon.